Everyone who knows me is well aware of the fact that I skateboard. The last couple of months I've been getting more and more questions about how excited I am for skateboarding in the Olympics. Tokyo 2021 will be the first year my biggest hobby is included in the games, and I've definitely got some feelings. Excitement is not one of them. Leaving aside all of the economical and political issues associated with the Olympics, I still think skateboarding's inclusion is a bad move. From my perspective, skateboarding deserves better than the Olympics. Part 1. Lack of objectivity. You can throw a javelin further than someone else, you can set a record time on the 100-meter dash, you could even see who jumps the highest using a long stick. However, skateboarding has never been about who you are better than. There is, as of now, no objective scoring system for skateboarding. I realize competitions such as Street League and the X Games have existed for a long time, but all of my complaints about the Olympics extend to them as well. It's hard to explain how many tricks are possible on a skateboard to a non-skateboarder, but let me try. At the most basic level, a board can rotate frontside or backside, clockwise or anti-clockwise, and flip in either direction. Each of these different movements can be combined and interchanged to create unique tricks. On top of that, the skateboarder's body can also rotate either frontside or backside, creating yet more unique tricks. Finally, each of the previously described tricks can be done from 4 different starting stances: standard, switch, fakie, and nollie. This is flip tricks at its base level, not including grinds, grabs, or more niche tricks, as well as combos and manuals. Hundreds and hundreds of tricks capable of being done on flat ground alone. The vast majority of Olympics viewers will have never skateboarded. They will take the judges' scores at face value because it takes years to learn the ins and outs of every skateboarding trick. How is it possible to look at these tricks and decide which are better than others? How is it possible to factor style into that equation? Just as an artist can interpret shapes and color differently depending on the piece, each skateboarder brings a distinct tone to every trick they do. It is impossible to have fair and objective competition with an activity so distinctly non-competitive. Any scoring system brought into skateboarding is arbitrary. Well, hey Zach, what about gymnastics? That's an artsy, expressionistic sport, and they've managed to find an objective scoring system. Hey, I'm getting to it. Part 2. Winning over self-expression. The Olympics scores artistic gymnastics with a difficulty score, or D score, and an execution score, or E score. D scores are based on perceived difficulty as decided by a 2-person panel, where a gymnast has their top 10 most difficult maneuvers given a point value. Their E score starts at a base 10, and deductions are made for every execution error. The scores are added up, giving the gymnast their final score. This scoring system was implemented by the International Gymnastics Federation in 2006, after controversies in the 2004 Games pushed for them to adopt a more objective method. That's objective in air quotes. Alright, my biggest concern from this example is the idea that within these competitions, there exists a known list of skills that when put in a routine will net a gymnast the most points. Despite the word artistic being in the title of the sport, it's a safer idea to pick the best scoring tricks you're capable of doing and do those. I'm not a gymnast, so take this with a grain of salt, but shouldn't an artistic endeavor not be reduced to the most difficult techniques you can use? The current rules written for skateboarding on the Olympics website are much more vague. They state that each skater will be scored on 2 45-second runs, and those 2 scores will be totaled into their final score. I worry about a future in skateboarding that looks like competitive gymnastics. A world where people don't choose their tricks based on their style or what they can do well, but by what scores they'll produce. I worry about a world where kids learning to skateboard will forgo certain tricks because they're fringe and uncompetitive. I know at this point I sound like a lunatic, but I feel there's precedent. The 2006 gymnastics score change has been met with opposition from many prominent coaches within the sport. The main argument boils down to competitions being over before they start. A gymnast must submit their entire routine to judges, and they are given a maximum possible score before performing. Since score values are already determined before a routine starts, competitors who have formulated a lower scoring routine are all but guaranteed to lose. Opponents to the system also argue that it favors extreme difficulty over form or consistency. Gymnasts' entire competitive careers are basically decided for them before they even make it to the Olympics. This rule change has changed whole routines. This rule change has changed the entirety of how people compete in the sport of gymnastics. Objectivity has no place in art. Self-expression cannot exist in a world with a score sheet. Part 3. Exclusion. Surya Bonali is a retired Olympic figure skater from France. She's a 3-time silver medalist in the annual figure skating championships, and she's the only Olympic figure skater to ever land a backflip in competition. It's normally an illegal move because all figure skating maneuvers need to be landed on one foot, and she managed to do that. She also happens to be black. Figure skating is a very white sport, and Bonali has stated due to things like her hairstyles or her mom making her skating costumes that she felt discriminated against. The rules of dress are vague in Olympic ice skating, stating that costumes must be modest, dignified, and appropriate for athletic competition. Purposefully hazy phrasing like this is easily exploitable to keep people out. On top of this, I found numerous articles of judges describing Bonali as powerful and aggressive in her skating style, whereas they'd use words like elegant and dainty for other skaters. Bonali believes that if she had been a white figure skater, she would have gotten endorsements sooner, been more fairly judged, and even won Olympic gold medals. Be it racism or elitism, certain barriers get set when a public eye is on anything. Who gets to decide who the unsavories are? Bonali undoubtedly pushed figure skating, but even to this day the sport is severely lacking in racial diversity, especially for black competitors. Skateboarding was originally seen as a bit of an outcast hobby, and though I find that sentiment kinda whack, nowadays it's still largely seen as unsavory. However, I think this is to skateboarding's benefit. Since we're all outcasts, everyone is welcome. Skateboarding has a long history of black excellence, so much so as to be recently immortalized with a Thrasher magazine cover. The Olympics elevates whatever it touches because it's seen as the pinnacle, the final horizon. This obviously brings an air of elitism to the hobby and harbors exclusionary practices. I really believe that skateboarders have made a good case for themselves about inclusivity, especially in recent years. Be it with the aforementioned Thrasher cover or LGBTQ-friendly brands like their skateboards. I don't want good skateboarders to be denied a chance to compete because they're unmarketable or not brand-friendly. Sure, being in the Olympics legitimizes the outcasts in some way. I just worry that it creates a new class of outcast and does more harm than good. Part 4. Money. Unfortunately, there's a billion-dollar industry tied up in the world of skateboarding, and tangled in that web are all the troubles of capitalism. One of my favorite shoe companies back in the early 2010s was Decline Footwear. Decline was skateboarder owned and operated, made great shoes, and probably most importantly, were affordable. Skate shoes blow out quick, especially when you're a kid with the free time and energy to skate every day. So being able to pick up a new pair of shoes for around $60 that would last a few months was a godsend. With all this going for them, it's hard to understand why Decline would go out of business in 2015, along with other great skate shoe companies like Gravis and S. Until you remember that Nike makes skate shoes. Hell, I'm willing to bet 90% of you, even the non-skateboarders, have owned a pair of Janoskis. It's impossible for smaller, independent companies to exist in the shadow of mega corporations like this. Nike worked hard to get its foothold in the skateboarding world, pouring millions into advertising after a failed attempt in the early 90s, and it looks like they're here to stay. This is my local skate park. I love it. Don't get me wrong, but it has its problems. Questionable obstacles, lack of maintenance, whatever, par for the course with most skate parks. Look where I end up with a couple-minute long drive though. This skate park is exactly 2 blocks away from Nike World Headquarters. Nike has the money to build these monoliths of wealth, but not enough to give back to the skateboarding community even 2 blocks away from them. Skateboarding is revenue for Nike, nothing else. Including skateboarding in the Olympics is going to inflate the already ridiculous market share of the industry. With that will come opportunists who will push smaller companies out of business. Deluxe Distribution carries some of the biggest brands in skateboarding, including Real Skateboards, Crooked, Spitfire Wheels, and Thunder Trucks. You can't purchase any of their goods from their online site, though. Reason being because Jim Thiebaud, one of the founders of Deluxe Distribution, doesn't want to compete with local shops. He doesn't want to push them out of business. If Amazon has shown us anything, it's that if people don't have to support small shops, then they won't. Skateboarders owe it to the community and to local shops to support them. We owe it to each other to keep the scene alive. And the conclusion. Who did I write this essay for? At time of posting, I have less than 20 subscribers, mostly people I work with and have forced to watch this video. As much as I would like to, I'm not going to keep skateboarding out of the Olympics. I also don't want to shame anybody for being excited about the whole deal either. I guess overall it's a selfish endeavor. I love skateboarding, in its weird, niche, all-accepting form. I hate seeing something I love slowly get more commercialized and monetized by the same people that would have scoffed at it only a few years ago. However, my version of skateboarding will still exist. The world can have gold medals, competition, and the biggest spotlight possible. I'm just gonna keep skating this curb on my lunch breaks.